Picking up stitches is a technique that helps you add new sections or borders without starting from scratch. So now I'm going to show you how to pick up the stitches along the lateral edge of a piece, so we can start knitting another section. In this case, I knitted this piece in a stockinette stitch, growing in this direction. And then I pick up the stitches along the side to knit a stockinette stitch again, but in the other direction. If we look at the back, you can see it creates a small seam that looks really neat and polished. To pick up the stitches from a lateral edge, the first thing we need to understand is exactly where to pick up them. Now we'll pick the stitches that are along the side, on the outer edge of the border. You can do so with the needles you usually work with. In this case, I'm knitting with these needles in English style, so I'll pick up the stitches using these needles. But if you are knitting in continental style, you can follow the same instructions. The only difference is that you'll pick up the stitches with whichever needle you are currently using, whether it's circular or double-pointed needle. First of all, it's important to understand how stitches work. In this case, we are knitting in a stockinette stitch and you can see the V shapes. Each V is one stitch. This is one stitch, so the one next to it is the first stitch of the row. And this is the stitch we need to pick, the one that is closest to the border. And how do we find it? Just go to the edge of your work and look for the first V, like you can see in here. This is the first stitch of the row. This is the second. And this is the third. You can see it? Third, second, first. So this is where we insert the needle. Now we need to understand how to identify the rows. Each of these strands marks a row. It's important so we don't miss any, or so we know which one to skip if the pattern asks. We'll see it more clearly in a moment while we are doing it. So now that we know how to identify the stitches and the rows, let's start. In this case, I'll use a different color yarn so it will be easier to see. So we are here on the lateral edge. This is the cast on, and over here is the bind off, and these are the lateral sides. We'll pick up this lateral. So first we need to locate the stitch. As you can see, these are the stitches closest to the edge, the ones we want to pick up. Now we are going to insert the needle in the space between the first and the second stitch of the first row. In this little hole you can see here. Insert the needle. You can see the needle is in the space between the first and the second stitch of the first row. Pick up the yarn and place it onto the needle like this. Now hold the tail and the working yarn, secure them with your fingers and bring the knitted piece up to the needle like this. Now you have your first stitch. Next, we'll go for the second stitch. First, we need to locate the second row and then insert the needle in the space between the first and the second stitch of that row. Now, we start knitting normally. Wrap the working yarn around the needle and bring the fabric up onto the needle. Now we have 2 new stitches on our needle. In here you can clearly see the next hole where we need to insert our needle, the third row. We do the same. Insert the needle in the space between the first and second stitch. Wrap the working yarn around the needle from back to front and bring the fabric up onto the needle, like this. Now we have 3 stitches on our needle. It's important to understand that each V is a stitch. When we insert our needle, we want to pick up the 2 strands that form the V. The second stitch on this row is this one, you see? And this is another stitch. These horizontal strands here show us the rows. You can see this is one row and this is the next row. So now we'll continue picking up the stitches and knitting them. Again, locate the row and the first stitch, insert the needle and knit it. Now you can clearly see the next hole where the needle goes. Let's do it. You can see here, this is the border stitch. Now we can knit as usual. We keep picking up and knitting the stitches row by row until the end. Now we are almost at the end, and we pick up and knit the last stitch of the last row. So now we have all the stitches picked up and knitted along the lateral edge. This is how it looks on the right side, and here is how it looks on the wrong side. You can see it forms a little seam, and you can also clearly see the first stitch of the row. You can see the V right here. And now we'll continue knitting normally in a stockinette stitch. This is the right side of our work. Now we turn and start knitting on the wrong side, so we'll pull across. Let's do it together. Just pull as usual. The only thing to keep in mind is the last stitch of the row, to secure the tail. When you reach the last stitch, pull it gently so the tail doesn't slip. Then you can pull the tail to adjust the tension and make the stitch neat. Now you just continue knitting normally on the stitch you are currently working on. So let's go over some notes and clarifications, things you might see in your patterns, or some common problems you might run into. In this tutorial, I'm picking up and knitting one stitch per row. You can see it clearly here. In every row, there is one new stitch. But what happens if your pattern asks you to pick up stitches every 2 rows or every 3 rows? Let's look that quickly. If the pattern says pick up one stitch every 2 rows, this means we pick up and knit one stitch, then skip the next row. We don't insert the needle in the following row, but in the second row, where we insert the needle and knit the next stitch. Then again, we skip the next row and work on the second row after that. Now imagine that the pattern says pick up and knit 2 stitches every 3 rows. In this case, we knit 2 stitches, one here, pick up and knit the second on the following row, and skip the third row. We don't insert the needle in that skipped row, but in the next one. Now we pick up and knit the next stitch on the following row. And then we skip a row. So we don't pick up in the next row, but in the one after that. And like this, we pick up and knit 2 stitches every 3 rows. The exact spacing will depend on your pattern, but the technique is always the same. Now let's check the most common problem when picking up and knitting stitches. It's very easy to accidentally insert the needle in the wrong stitch. Instead of picking up the first stitch of the row, the one closest to the border, you might insert the needle into the second or third stitch, or even in the middle of a stitch. Let's see what that looks like so you can spot and correct it. Here, you should pick up the stitch at the edge, like this. But if you insert the needle in the middle of a second stitch, and continue like this, you see the problem. The line of picked up stitches is no longer straight. There is an interruption. This shows that you didn't pick up the first stitch of the row, but the second. To fix it, just undo the stitches and start again. Picking up the first stitch of each row correctly. And that's it. Now you know exactly how to pick up and knit the stitches along a lateral edge. This is a super helpful technique when you want to add new sections, just like we did here. It creates a clean, neat finish on both sides of the work. On the back, you see the little tail from the first stitch. Later on, you can simply wave it in and secure it between the stitches so everything looks tidy. You can use this technique for borders, button bands, or any time you want to knit in a different direction without having to start a new piece.